Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Carlson Cards Podcast. My guest today is a big time collector that is very, very varied in how he collects. And we're going to learn about a lot of different ways of collecting that hopefully will inspire you and maybe introduce you to new ways of collecting that you haven't thought of. And that's why I love Danny here. He's got such an amazing collection and really is creative in the way he collects. So, Danny, thanks so much for hopping on. You obviously go by @Modest Card Collection on Instagram because I didn't mention that yet. But how is everything going?
Everything's great, man. Thanks for having me. Welcome back to the podcast forum. Happy to have you back. Can't have enough collector content out there these days. So thanks to you, and hope all is well with you and the family.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. How is your summer going? How's the family? How's card collecting been this year for you so
Everything's
far?
great. Everything's great. My family's great. Kids are in summer camp outdoors where it's hot as can be while I'm in the air conditioning. So tough love, but they're having the time of their life, and all is well here. And then from a collecting standpoint, this year has been filled with a lot of surprises and exciting pickups. So it's been a good year so far, and I'm looking forward to the next 6 months or so of collecting and of course summer and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, 100%. So maybe just to start, I always like to kind of just give an overview of, who you are and tell it yourself, obviously how you feel, see fit. And then kind of your collector journey. So if you want to touch on maybe if this was, a thing for you as a kid, how you kind of got it back into cards, whatever the story is there, would love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in Brooklyn, New York, which I think is kind of a thread that runs through a lot of my collection. I grew up, in the area, in the tri-state area, over the Hudson River in New Jersey for most of my life, and basically got into collecting. Essentially, I found a box of cards in my childhood home from when I was very young. I think I was opening packs and when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. So this is like the early 90s. Lots of 91 Skybox, 92 Tops, lots of Pro Line football. And a lot of those packs I bought with my father, who would take me to the local stationery store, and we would snatch up, packs, and I would just rip them endlessly. And then fast forward, when I found that box, probably 2020. And just going through those cards and thumbing through them, it's funny how it was triggering parts of my brain. Like I remembered a lot of the cards, so I was having this little tingle, like spidey senses in my head, and I figured, what's current card collecting like? And obviously at that point it was kind of blowing up, especially with like alternative ways to like spend money, invest money, and that sort of stuff. And so it piqued my interest, and so I started to kind of, at that point, I had to go through the introduction gates of hell of collecting to becoming a collector in 2020. That so many podcast hosts have the same story from there, right? You kind of evolve into that flipping and grading and investing, and that paying attention to all that stuff. And then I finally signed up for Instagram with just a strictly sports card account in like 2021, in the later half of it. And that was really like the lights turned on. I was like, oh, collecting isn't like some sort of weird stock market based on like very ultra modern performance. And this hobby is so much more enjoyable when you're actually collecting things that you don't intend on selling. Eventually you might, but when you make it more personal and it just became so much more enjoyable at that point.
That's amazing. It's funny how you touch on the Instagram, the kind of being the catalyst to that, because I fully agree. I almost feel like we all hone each other's swords on there, right? Like kind of you feed off of other people, get feedback from other people, learn from other people. Like it's just this, I don't know. I feel like we're all helping each other on there, which is just so cool. I don't know if you'd agree about that.
No, I agree with it. I mean, a lot of like the PCs I ended up pursuing and stuff like that. It was like I saw other cards of like, really popular players, and especially with football, which is something we love, and like that late 90s stuff, and how many different licensed products there are, and I'd see like a card of like Dan Marino. I'd be like, does my player PC have a card in that parallel? And start kind of digging into that, and then you kind of spiral into different little areas from there. So a lot of it is it just the knowledge you would get, scrolling through your feed and seeing all these cards that no YouTube influencer or whatever promote, that's the good stuff, right? Like that's what we enjoy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So I know we were chatting before this. We have so many cards and amazing collection pieces to share here. So I was thinking we could just jump right in if you're good with it.
Yeah, sure.
So the first topic, and I know again I mentioned the intro that kind of this episode we're essentially gearing towards based on how you collect is a very varied methods here. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and we have a ton of really awesome examples, is team set collecting. I would love if maybe before we even dive into the sets shown here and the next couple sets, if you could just kind of mention maybe what inspired you to team collect, and then also with that, I would love to hear like a pros and cons if that's feasible on your end, kind of like what you like about the team set collecting versus what's maybe a drawback compared to maybe a little bit of a more unfocused direction of collecting. So yeah, feel free to run with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of the team set collecting was really propelled by Player PC. So I have a lot of different Yankee team sets that I'm trying to build out. Some range from on the more expensive side to the less expensive side. So really, Bernie Williams is the catalyst for it. He's someone that I PC. He's probably my main player PC. For you younger folks out there, Bernie Williams was the center fielder for the Yankees during their dynasty in the late 90s, early 2000s. And just someone I always loved as a kid. One of my favorite Yankee. Played the game the right way, was a good guy, was a classical guitar player. He still tours the world playing guitar. He was a very great player, and he had a million big hits. That's an over exaggeration. He had dozens of big hits in the World Series and in the playoffs. So, what you're showing right now is the 1999 Fleer Brilliance, which is obviously a set that has become very, very popular. And he was the first card I got here. And when I was player PCing, when I started player PCing Bernie, this was one of the cards I really wanted to get because I'd seen it on Instagram. I'd seen the card and the shine of a 24K. And knowing they were serial numbered to 24, I said, as soon as I see one, I'm going to try to get it. So one popped up late night one night. I binned it. Got it in hand, and it was like, wow, this parallel is awesome. How can I get more of them? What makes sense for me to pursue more of them? And I was like, well, let me look at the Yankee team set. When you ask about drawbacks to team set collecting, there's one huge drawback to every Yankee team set, especially in the late 90s, and his name is Derek Jeter.
I was just going to spoil that. I'm guessing you're about to say Derek Jeter.
He is the bane of my existence when it comes to team collecting. Obviously, there's an extreme premium to having any of his cards. So, in this 24K set that you're showing right now for the viewers, Derek Jeter is missing and Chuck Knobloch's missing. Those are the only two that are missing. And, I before I go into any of these Yankee sets, I kind of level with myself and say, you're probably never going to get the Derek Jeter card. And that's okay. That's okay. I'd rather have that money in my pocket to, do other things than spend 5 figures on Jeter cards. But so it was always the player that kind of propelled me into the team, collecting.
No, that's amazing. And kind of a funny thing there, you touch on, I never really, you put it into words very eloquently, but that is a drawback to having such a great team in Dynasty. Like even I think, obviously I'm a Packers fan. I've shared on here multiple times. I don't actually collect a ton of Packers because number one, the guy I probably would collect, Aaron Rodgers, is super expensive. And he's also, I feel there's a lot of involvement still with he's actively playing. What if he plays good for the Jets, blah, blah, blah. Right. And I think here, you have a player like Jeter where just as a mega superstar, people who aren't even a fan of the Yankees want to collect him. It's like one of those drawbacks of having such a likable and collectible player, I'd imagine, with the team sets here, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and it comes with the success, right? Like if you ask me the most iconic sports teams of my fandom, it's the late 90s Yankees. Well, unfortunately, the captain of that team that played shortstop and was dating all the models in New York City and is desirable not just for baseball fans, people that don't collect baseball, they look for Derek Jeter cards. So he is the main drawback to all my team sets. And, of course, again, I'm at ease with not having that card. That's okay. I'll fill it in with maybe a 99 serial number to 99 gold or a base, or if I need to have the OCD attached. But, it's quite all right that I can move on without him.
Random side comment too. You mentioned dating all the models stuff. I saw an image on Instagram, I think it was, where it showed a baseball diamond and it was like the Derek Jeter dating lineup or something. And I was like, it's like half your childhood crushes are on this. It's like this guy is living the dream. Like, what's up with that? But
it's so funny. Yeah, I was explaining to my son the other day, about Derek Jeter, because he's gotten into baseball a lot this year. And I'm like, Derek Jeter was just so cool, man. I was like, he used to date just like the most famous actresses, and he was just like, he's like, his 8-year-old brain was trying to process all that, but it was a funny conversation.
Dad, why did he date so many? Dad, why didn't he just marry one? You don't have to get into that too much.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, well, in time you'll put that all together.
Yeah. Maybe that'll be you one day, son. Okay, awesome. So this is the 24 karat set. I know, again, we had multiple other sets, so I was going to kind of just step through, and maybe if you want to touch on the sets we have shown here. I did combine baseball and football because I figured they'd touch with each other here. So maybe just, again, similarly touch on the set, what you liked about it, what maybe drew you to this one, and then any drawbacks on this set that you found or anything like that.
Yeah, the drawbacks to this one is it's become the most popular thing in the planet I'm collecting right now. So right now we're looking at 98 PMGs. I have a Giants and Yankees set. Basically, the origin of all this was that I was able to pick up that Bernie Williams was the first one that I got here. And again, once I got a 98 PMG, it was like, wow, I'd love to get more of these. So slowly but surely, I've kind of assembled, most of the Yankees. This set is missing 2 players, Derek Jeter included, of course, which is a wildly expensive card these days. And then the Giants set here, I think is missing just Strahan. But the reason I started to collect all these PMGs was that I wanted to, after I got the Bernie Williams one and then the Chris Callaway one, who was like a very mediocre receiver for the Giants, after I got the Callaway one with the New York City background and the Twin Towers in the background, I said, it'd be really cool if I could build out a set that was just across all the sports and it had all the New York City landscapes in the background. So that's a thing that I'm actually 3 short of. One is Derek Jeter. One's Patrick Ewing, which is also probably unobtainable, and John Olerud. So that comes across with things that aren't listed here, Jets and Mets as well. But, I'm so close on, just filling the team sets out that, one day I might actually pursue them. But yeah, the real drawback to this is just how popular they've become, and Derek Jeter.
So I got a couple questions. First one, how do you handle with a set like this that is getting a lot of outside interest? Again, from people who aren't team collectors, it's just the overall parallel is super popular. So I'd imagine you're talking, like you mentioned, niche players might be very, very hard to find, and not just hard to find, but expensive. How do you kind of balance that within your collection and budget? Does that kind of tie in at all?
I think you just need to be practical about the approach. I mean, recently John Olerud came to auction, and that was a card I kind of circled as, maybe $600, $700. And, I was ready to kind of make a move on that and then sell some stuff off the cover for it. It ended up selling for $3,000. So, with the popularity this set is getting, I think just knowing time is on your side. And that's the most important part to these team sets. It's just trying to just remember that, if I'm very interested in this hobby, I want to be here for several years, Lord willing, so over time, eventually that opportunity will arise where, the price feels right. And you'll be able to finish out a set, and you got to remember, once the set's over, much like when the mail day arrives, it's over, and it kind of, you might evolve and move on from it, or, the hunt is so exhilarating and fun to do, to find these things, to locate them, to make the deal, that part is really enjoyable as well. So, I just always have to pump the brakes and just be practical about what it is I'm collecting. And also, sometimes people see things and they're building out sets or whatever, and they want to overspend on it to finish their set. You know what I mean? So, I have a feeling next time a John Olerud pops up, hopefully it's not $3,000, so I don't know of a ton of Olerud collectors. So I'm just trying to be pragmatic about it as best you can. Cause I know, we definitely suffer from FOMO and, urgency to get that card now. Cause who knows, it might not pop up for another couple of years, but I'm at ease with that.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing insight there. And something I think, you kind of touched on, I've really recently tried to remind myself, as we've talked and I've gotten frustrated with losing auctions, etc. I've seen research that shows, like you just kind of hinted at there, where as humans, our enjoyment, actually the vast majority is the run up to reaching a goal. So like a set here, and the actual completion is not nearly as enjoyable for most people as the hunt and the chase and, stuff like that. So I try to remind myself, and it doesn't always help, kind of impatient. But the other thing, this is a random quote I heard the other day, but I thought it applied to cards. It's a hunter's goal is not the prize. A hunter's goal is to hunt. That's kind of, I would say you could swap the word collector right there. Yeah. I mean, it's like,
put it on tattoo it on my back. I love it.
Yeah.
No, it's a great point. It's a great point. I mean, how many times as collectors are you so excited for that mail day to come, whether it's like a $20 card or a very expensive card, and then it shows up and you're like, wow, this is awesome for about, 4 hours. And then you kind of put it away and, kind of slips your mind from there, that's how it is usually,
Yeah, totally. Awesome. So next slide here, we'll jump over. We have another great set here. Very good looking. Love to hear more about it.
Yeah, 98 rubies, or it's 99 in baseball, actually. This is a set that, again, Bernie Williams was the Kickstarter for it. And once I had it in hand, it just, I was like, I wanted to pursue more. Now, in this set, there's a Derek Jeter. The base set Derek Jeter is a 5-figure card, but the Spring Fling popped up on Golden, and that was, 20% the price of that. So I made a stab at that in an auction and was able to win it. But really Bernie was the one who kickstarted this, and it just that ruby thing. So some people have called me a sicko because most of this set is in my binder. So obviously there's most people would slab this, but there's something I really find enjoyable about having this set in a binder. When you're flipping through the pages, the way it reflects, the way it's put together, the player photos on this set I think are outstanding. So it's one of those sets that it kind of just lives in the binder for me. And I'm very happy with it being there because it just, there's something about the paper stock of these late 90s sets too, not credentials, because obviously that's acetate, but they're so flimsy when you hold them in hand. They're just like, almost like junk wax material, and they're kind of thick because so much ink is on the top of it, or the surface, or, however the process is made. So there's something I really enjoy about having them in a binder.
That makes sense. So a few questions with that too. Number one, are you ever tempted to snap these two that I see that are in a slab? Number two, how do you protect them properly in a binder? Is there anything you do particular? I don't have. I really need to get into binder collecting. I keep saying that. I don't do that yet, but I'd love to hear like on these, kind of what we would call mid or higher end cards. How do you protect them properly?
Yeah. So I mean, I use Z Folio binders. So the drawback to those is that you can't see the backs of the cards, which I'm quite all right with. I know some people do not like that, but the binder is very sturdy and whatnot, and they're penny sleeved from there. Again, I think that's safe, and they seem very safe in there. Especially this kind of card stock. I notice refractors sometimes they kind of almost like sheen together, and you kind of have to peel them off. But this set seems pretty safe the way it is there. As for cracking them, I have cracked. I think the Chuck Knobloch I definitely cracked recently. I think the rest I have not been slabbed, but the Jeter, I just want to be a little more precious with. Although I would love to crack it as a 7. It's like, eh. And then that Clemens is 8. I believe that might be the highest grade. There might be 1.9. So to me, it's just not worth the cracking effort if I ever were to regrade it. But I actually would consider cracking the Jeter. But now that I'm saying it out loud, I think that's kind of crazy. I'm just going to leave it right there.
That makes sense. And final quick one here. When purchasing these, like specifically this set, I'm sure others when they're raw and ungraded, are there any fear? It sounds like you did buy many of them ungraded. Is there any fear on legitimacy on a set like this? I know other sets. I'm just not sure on the Rubies. I've never really heard of too many backdoor copies or fake stamps or anything. Is that any worries on a set like this?
I mean, it's a great question. I have seen. I think there at one point there was Griffey that had. Geez, I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing here, but I believe there was a Griffey that was BGS and PSA slapped the same serial number, so that was concerning. And I think I might have seen this set without a serial number. I could be wrong there, but that's part of the risk I kind of take when buying it and whatnot. But it's not rampant like fake serial numbers on this set the way it is with like the 97 PMGs at all. So pretty confident in most of the purchases, and just getting them from reputable people. Usually, it's not usually from it seems like they would be coming from reputable places of people I could track down if there was an issue.
Yeah, makes sense. Random question too that I forgot about on the other slide. Can you explain to me as a non-New Yorker, how does the Jets Giants fandom and the Yankees Mets fandom work? Is that based on where you're born, what your parents like? Like
it's actually a great question.
Yeah, I have no idea.
No, it's an awesome question because if you're not from here, you probably generally Jets and Mets fans go hand in hand because the Jets' original stadium was in Shea Stadium.
Okay, it's not because they rhyme. That has nothing to do with it.
That's good. I like that actually. So Jets Mets, actually maybe that's why they do rhyme because they played at the same stadium. So usually the Queens and Long Island contingent tend to be more Jets and Mets fans. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong in their thing, but that's always been my interpretation. And then the Giants, when their original stadium was Yankee Stadium until they built the Meadowlands also. So usually it's Giants, Yankees, and that actually draws in a lot of Connecticut people, North Jersey people and whatnot. I remember I went to school in New England, and a lot of people's dads were Giants fans because the Patriots were horrible and the Giants were the team in the 60s. They had some lulls in the 70s and early 80s, but I think the Giants would also actually play a game at Yale once a year. I think I could be wrong there, but they definitely had like a big contingent of fans in Connecticut as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Now those same dads are New England fans.
Yeah, that would be smart to switch over to the Patriots. You'll have a lot more enjoyable Sundays, and you won't have your whole weekend ruined by
Awesome. Next set here.
Yeah, this is one that's really in its infancy that I started pursuing earlier or late last year. But these are Star Rubies for Giants. So basically it's 97, 98. I don't even think I'm halfway through here yet. But again, being pragmatic about what I buy, there's a couple that are listed on eBay for too high of a price. And to me, it's just, again, it's not a rush. I could fill it out whenever, So this is very much its infancy. But, I do love 97, 98 Rubies here because of the old Giants logo, helmet and jersey. There's just something super duper nostalgic to me about seeing that. And whenever they wear them, I'm always very excited on Sundays. But, there's just, it's very iconic to me. It reminds me a lot of my childhood Sundays. So I do love these two sets.
Quick one on these two with the Giants, not being somebody who's super familiar with 90s football. Who are the big players here outside of the two defensive guys that probably come to mind for me? Are there any other like offensive players that are pretty expensive usually for these sets?
Each set is Tiki is in each set, which is probably the more expensive one. And the straight hand, I believe, is only in the 98 here, the hyper style.
Oh, yeah. How long did LT play? I'm showing my
LT was
my
done.
youth
I think
here.
his career ended in 94, 95 LT.
So a couple years prior. Yeah.
Yeah, so he doesn't really have that many exciting cards, Lawrence Taylor. You'd have to kind of dip into like ultra modern, like parallels and stuff like that. Yeah,
Makes sense. So like a 2022 Prism Elephant parallel or something.
yeah,
Is that what
exactly
you're
right. Yeah, some Tigers
recommending?
stripes or whatever. Yeah, those are the ones you probably want. Yeah, there's not a ton of exciting LT cards, unfortunately, because obviously he's probably. I mean, he's the best giant of all time.
So one thing I've noticed with these two, another, final question on this set, especially the 97s, I was kind of looking at just out of pure curiosity because I had no idea what these things go for, but I knew it's a super desired set from what I've seen with how people rank their hierarchy of parallels here for football. What's the deal with how freaking like hard they are to find and like never popping up in history for sales? It looks like I've looked at like just for fun, like again, Barry Sanders, Brett Favre, Jerry Rice. It is absolutely shocking how few there are, even though they're numbered out of, I think, 30, right?
50. Well, the 98 or the hyper version here, because I think it's 98 in football and 99 in baseball. Maybe. Yeah. So anyway, the hyper version, the rookies are numbered to 30. Everyone else is 50. And same with the 97. They're all to 50. But yeah, 97 specifically, they don't often pop up. So if you see one, it's a good idea to try to grab it that you want it. But I do not know the story behind it. Obviously, I wasn't collecting at that time, but there has to be some reason for it. Because I mean, honestly, you see way more basketball ones than you do football, which is really bizarre. And then baseball does not have a version of that. So
makes sense. I wonder too if it's like, well, part of the factor maybe, although you just said basketball pops up a lot, but it's like maybe that first year thing too. I have no idea. Right at the time, I was just born in 97, but I wonder too if it's not clear that the Star Rubies was an important thing that we're chasing after at the time. I have no idea, but
100%. I mean, yeah, I'm sure a lot more basketball was ripped in the late 90s because of Michael Jordan than the football at the time, right? So that could totally also make sense. But yeah, actually, if someone out there is a more veteran collector, I'd love to hear what their thoughts on that were.
Okay, awesome. Next team set here.
Hey, this is one that's absolutely 110% completed because Derek Jeter is in it. Yay! So yeah, this is 98 Flair Showcase Row Zero Legacy Collection. Now, for people who aren't familiar with the set, there's a lot of backdoor copies of this set from whenever. So the main thing is on the back of the cards above the stat box, their name will be in purple. If there's no name, that means it's a backdoor copy. It was not pack pulled. All of these have the purple name on the back, although you can't see that here. Again, this set was kicked off in the bottom left corner is a Bernie Williams. It's hard to tell, but that is not a legacy collection to 100. That is a one-of-one masterpiece, that one.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was able to find that on eBay, started DMing back and forth with the seller about a price. Turned out he actually lived in New Jersey. So we actually ended up meeting up at a Starbucks where I handed him an envelope of cash and he handed me the card. And it was one of the early acquisitions in my Bernie PC. And as I was leaving, he turned to me and goes, "Hey, I'm just glad this card's going to a collector." And it was the first time I had ever really at that point, I think I was pretty new on Instagram and stuff. And I was like, "Oh, collector. Wow. Yeah, I never thought of that. But yeah, it's in a forever home, So this was a cool set just to kind of complete. And again, the Jeter was something, it was a war of attrition to get that Jeter. When I started doing the set, the price was quite high for a PSA 8. PSA 9 is almost twice the price. So I just waited and waited and waited. And finally, one popped up on Heritage, and I was able to grab it at a price that was kind of where I targeted that price to be. But, it's not the most infrequent set you see. I mean, I would say that, especially the Jeter, you probably see 4 or 5 times a year. But, everyone else kind of came together slowly. And then it's pretty cool that petted is PSA 10, which is pretty hard for that set to do it. Although it's slabbed upside down. So if you turn that card around, actually his whole stat box and everything is upside down. So, but it's all good.
That's amazing. Quick question too with this set. So I added my first couple from this set, I think right at the end of last year or at the beginning of this year, I can't remember. For Charles Woodson, I added 2 row 0, row 1, and I do have row 3 still as well. But I think I'm leaning towards, and I'd love to hear your opinion here. I have the row 3. I don't really care about the look of them as much. The row 2s and 3s from this set. It seems like row 1 and row 0 are, well, generally more desired, it seems like, but from my own sense, without knowing that when I got them, it's like these look a lot cooler than the other rows. Is that pretty consistent across the board from your experience?
Yeah, I agree with that with the row zeros. I think they look way more better. The only one I own on a different row from this year is Bernie as a player PC. Cause at some point you got to hone in what you are collecting. So beyond filling out Bernie's rows for this year, I don't really have any desire to go any further than that unless the price was very, very good. But yeah, I do think that this mojo pattern, or it looks almost like DNA or something.
Yeah.
I do find that to be the most desirable and the better of the rows from really the first 2 years of Showcase.
Awesome. Now we get into some different side of your collecting. I know this, we mentioned some binder collecting already a little bit. Obviously, this looks like a very different set than what we've already discussed. So, would love to hear kind of, again, if you could maybe explain some of the pros and cons that you found of binder collecting. How does it make you feel? That sort of thing. I'd love to hear a little bit
You
more
know,
about this.
so trying to reconstruct how my brain worked when I was 6, 7, 8 years old. One thing I noticed going through my childhood collection is that I stopped sports card collecting pretty early on, but I continued to collect like Marvel cards. And for whatever reason, like I had meticulously put all of them in a binder in sleeves, number order, built out this set, right? Like if there's a card missing, it's like very clear that, like number 54 is the 54th square. You know what I mean? So I think the reason I kept collecting Marvel cards I believe, is because the checklists were kind of manageable and I knew everyone, right? Whereas, you're opening baseball upper deck and there's like a 600, card checklist and yada, yada. So I think I actually really enjoyed that back, 35 years ago or whatever. Fast forward to now, and just recently, actually, I started to really focus on my binder collecting. And I noticed that, like, just from, just an objective standpoint, I love putting together pieces of the puzzle, right? So I started to kind of redo my binder, add little cards for each one that's missing. And as I go along, I can pull out a card and add another one, So it's also helped me kind of hone in on collecting, because when I'm buying something, it's like, where does this go in my collection, right? Like my Zion cases are very organized, and now my binders are very organized. And like, do I have a place to put this in my binder? So that's really helped out with, not just purchasing and keeping that, like, staying on the straight and narrow with that. What you're showing right now is 2009 Chrome baseball Yankees team set I'm working on, numbered to 50 with the gold refractors and tops. This is a very special team to me. At the time, this was the first year in the new Yankee Stadium. This was the last time the Yankees have won a championship. It was honestly one of the better teams in baseball history, to be honest with you. I'd say a top 10 team of all time. They dominated wire to wire. And at that time, I still had partial season tickets. So I was very invested in this team in 2009. So I really enjoyed watching him. I watched almost every single game. I could not wait for the games to start. This is a single guy behavior living in a studio apartment in Manhattan. So now I would not have time for all that. But anyway, it's just a really special team to me. And really the tricky part of this is that, it's been taking almost 2.5 years and I'm still only halfway through. It's been really hard to actually track down a lot of these. Of all these cards here, I actually just bought the Derek Jeter this week, so I'm very excited about that. But then other than that, I've only seen one other card that's missing here that I lost in auction. So it's been a kind of a tricky one to kind of put together, but really enjoyable when I do add the pieces. And it's a very nice experience when you are able to locate and buy them at the right price.
Part of that too, do you find similar enjoyment for, I don't know what the lower end cards of this set go for, maybe like $20? I have no idea. But do you find an enjoyable, like, just as enjoyable sliding one in that's, again, maybe a lower end or cheaper one versus an expensive one? Like, do you even feel a real difference when you're in the binder?
Absolutely. And honestly, with a lot of these team sets too, like going back to like the 24Ks and stuff like that, it's like it's not finding Roger Clemens that concerns me. It's finding like Ryan Bradley and Ricky Leday and these lesser known commodities in the world, because those are the cards that most likely, someone pulled in 1999 or 2000. It was like, what am I going to do with this, right? So when you do find the lower end one, and there really is nothing quite like as exciting as when you get good value on a card. So when you find a lesser name that you really need and you buy that card for $15, that's really exciting, and to me, that's like one of the better feelings in the hobby.
Yeah, I can relate with my 2013 Select Gold Prism set. It's like, I'm actually noticing too, like you just said, getting a good deal on a really obscure player, it feels super, almost as exciting as paying market value for an expensive one that you had a hard time finding. Like, it's just such a great feeling knowing, because I think like for you too, I know I have so many left. So it's like, I just like being able to get something that I feel like it was a good deal, and it also helps my set. It's just very enjoyable.
Yeah, I 110% agree with that. There's something really nice. I've noticed as I've continued to collect, it's one thing to get the card that you're looking for it, and that's a good feeling in itself. But when you have to overpay for it, there is always that little asterisk towards it, where it's like, I had to overpay for this card, right? When you find the card you're really looking for at a value under what you thought, I mean, then you're like, wow, this is now one of my favorite cards, because there is like, when you pull it out, that's what you kind of think about, like, oh, I was able to get this one at a price under what I thought, and
Mhm.
that feels very rewarding.
Yeah, the other thing I think about with it too is like I almost feel like cheating when I pay way above market value on an expensive one because it's
Right.
like I know if I had unlimited money I could put this set together much quicker, but that doesn't fit what I am. You know what I mean? Like it just feels like you're kind of
Totally.
cheating almost. I don't know how to explain
No,
that.
yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, and it's kind of like, you're right. If you have unlimited funds, you could always track cards down, right? But
Yep.
it's part of what makes it a fun and challenge for us is trying to fit them within our budget and our wheelhouse of what it is we're trying to build, especially when you have bigger goals of like chasing down a whole set.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Next binder. What do we got here?
Yeah, and this is basically just to highlight just how you could have fun with cheaper binders. So this is a 2000 Chrome Yankee team set. I love the design this year, and they're not the most infrequent cards to find. I mean, even the highest end card here is probably Derek Jeter. There's just base refractors that year. There's nothing else. There's no parallels. There's no anything like that. So to me, this is kind of fun, just being patient and conscious of what you're spending, right? So I try to find very well centered cards in case one day I did want to grade them, and maybe then the value of it would go up if I did. But also just try to stay on target with like not overpaying. Even the Derek Jeter in this set, I'd say maybe it's like $150, $200 card. So it's not like one of these $40,000 Derek Jeter cards, right? So this is a nice little fun set, and it's a really clean design that year. But it's like, I mean, most of these refractors have cost me $7 to $10, like $12, but it just makes for a beautiful page in my binders.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It is good to see how, like we already just talked about, the enjoyment level probably doesn't really change that much based on price point for something like this, which I think
As
is the
human,
good thing.
yeah, as human beings, we love deals. I'll give you a perfect example. Joe Girardi's missing here.
Mhm.
There's one sitting on eBay for $16. I refuse to go for more than $5. Like I will not pay more than $5. I've even messaged a person like, how about $5? Here are the comps. I'm like, the auction person didn't respond. I'm like, you know what? Joe Girardi's gonna have to wait. We're gonna have to wait till I find one for $5 or $6 that's well centered, and that's part of the beauty of it.
All right. So third way that you collect, and this one again, I can't recall ever seeing this prior to you. Maybe there is somebody and you can give them a shout out, but I think maybe you came up with this, or again, at least what I see. I haven't seen anyone else do this. You do a lot of bit of NFL MVP collecting. So I'd love if you could explain what this is because I think I have a general idea, but I'd love to just, again, maybe hear the inspiration. How do you limit yourself? Like again, I know you're going for a player one for every year. Are
Right.
you only looking for certain types of cards? Like, how do you decide what card you want to go for here? So, I would love to hear
Yeah.
some more about this.
Thank you. So yeah, the first time I ever honed in on anything very early in my collecting was I wanted to put together an NBA MVP set, and it was the first time I ever like tried to like find an avenue. So basically, the theory behind it was that every year there was an MVP because I always love that discussion, and especially in the NBA, it's such a. I mean, I guess in the NFL too, it's such a hot like topic like midway through the season. Who is the MVP? So NBA was obviously one of the first things I started collecting was basketball. And I came in like a lot of us. And so, if the MVP in 1974 was Bob McAdoo, I try to get a 1974 Topps Bob McAdoo card, right? If the MVP in 2018 was Giannis, I try to get a 2018 Giannis card. So I built that set out rather quickly, and I put too much like capital into the set. And so actually recently, as of right now, actually, I've decided to co-sign most of that set and only hang on to the cards that were significant to me from a personal standpoint, like 1990 Skybox Jordan, 91 Skybox Jordan. Those were the chase cards when I was growing up. So I wanted to keep those, and then some of the modern ones that are serial numbered that I like aesthetically, I've kept. But about a year and a half ago, at the beginning of 2023, I was like, let me try to do the parallel of that with the NFL MVP set. I thought about NFL Super Bowl MVPs, but that's all Tom Brady. All roads lead through Tom Brady. And then NFL MVPs, all roads lead through Peyton Manning. So I was like, let me take the Peyton path. That'd be a little easier. And I said to myself, too, is that this will be a very slow burn. The NBA MVP thing, I tried to do that as quick as possible. And one time I was trying to get really high end or high graded vintage cards. I was like, this is going to be the opposite of that. This is going to be, I'm going to pump as little funds into this as possible. And it'll give me a great opportunity to learn more about football collecting, learn about vintage football, and just slow down in terms of like when you get cards, So I basically kind of, thought year by year about what parallel and set I kind of wanted to collect. Like, for instance, in 2006, there is that LaDainian Tomlinson finest Sims here. But I was like, I'm going to wait for this card to pop up. And eventually, our friend Brooklyn Barry Bright, a dear friend of mine, had a second copy he was able to sell to me. But, I just kind of waited around. Like 2002, obviously, we love Finest, right? So that Xbox, Pat Nicholson bought it at like a card show somewhere locally. And I hounded him for about 6 months till he finally was able to sell it to me. So it gives me a good opportunity to kind of collect some of the sets and parallels that we really love. And, again, it's like eventually, maybe I move off vintage, maybe I move off some of the higher grade things, but it kind of gives you an excuse to kind of always look for something and wait around for the right price, and I've kind of leaned into things I just find visually pleasing to look at. Like there's a lot of color matches involved, especially with the ultra modern stuff. Or like designs I really like, but just trying to keep this in as budgeted as a category as possible, but just something fun to own and chase as well.
Who was that player in 2002, by the way?
Rich Gannon.
Rich Gannon, really?
Yeah, his 2002 MVP right there. Yeah, one of the anomalies. The other really funny anomaly is 1982. You see a guy here. He looks like a young Bob Dylan. That's Mark Mosley. He was a place kicker.
What?
Yeah, he led the league in points that year. It was a strike year, so he ended up being the MVP that year. So there's just all these little fun anomalies from like building up the set that you kind of learn about. And again, if I eventually move on from it, that's okay. But at this point, I really enjoy like as I consolidate my collection. This has really stood up so far in terms of just owning it and having fun with it.
Yeah, and noticing too, and you touched on this a little bit already, but I see, especially like let's say like 2000 onward, a lot of especially color matches is what I'm seeing, in sets that are perhaps iconic but don't necessarily break the bank. It sounds like that's kind of what you've done. It even like I see a Rodgers down there, like maybe like a green something. Photo's a little too small, but it's just like I think really cool that you've stuck to like really just great aesthetic cards and don't care about price, don't care about grade. I'm sure too much. Like
exactly. I mean, that's what I really tried to do as much as I can with this because I again, it's like just trial and error and learning things. And when I did the NBA MVP, it's like a mouthful to say it. That set, it's something. At the time, that was my priority, and I didn't know enough about vintage and I didn't know enough about ultra modern and modern. And I was just trying to put that set together as quickly as possible. I got within putting 3 to get like 3 away from completing the whole thing. And then I was just like, every time I open these cards, I wasn't feeling it anymore. You know what I mean? And the decision recently to really break up the set and take away, I mean, I think at this point I sold off about 80% of it. It kind of felt like more of an anchor to my collecting than it was beneficial, So, with vintage, you could always grab that stuff again, right? And maybe I go back to that NBA MVP set one day and just the vintage is, much lower grades with just looking for things that are well-centered in PSA 4 or something like that. But learning from that experience, I wanted to apply to this experience and take it nice and slowly.
Awesome. Appreciate it. All right, now we shift over to your Mount Rushmore. You gave 5 cards, so this first slide is just the 1, and then the other one will be the 4. So love you can touch on this card and just a reminder to explain what we're looking at for those who don't have a visual so they know what we're talking about.
You got it, man. So yeah, the honorable mention, because it doesn't quite fit in with like my avenues, is this 1997 Metal Universe Precious Metal Gem Championship. So the rounder PMGs for those listening of Larry Johnson. I love the New York Knicks. I love the New York Knicks. I was so excited this year when they were good again. But it's one of the PCs I've really had a tough time kind of making comprehensible. I was for a while accumulating a lot of cards from these bad Knicks teams over the last 20 years. I've recently decided to move on from a lot of those just because they weren't really what I wanted represented in my collection. But this Larry Johnson popped up an auction last summer. A seller in China posted a bunch of Larry Johnson bangers on like a 7-day auction. And it was one of those situations where I actually got ahead of things and I actually had just consolidated a ton of my PC. So I had some funds to go after this when it popped up. I was like ready to go. And I was like, again, this also checks the box of having a New York City background. That's the New York Stock Exchange behind him. Awesome. So I was like, let me just try to put in a decent bid here that I did not think would win. And the auction expired and the hammer was about 66% of what I put down so I was thrilled. It was raw. So I was a little nervous about that. I sent it off for a rush grade at PSA, but obviously it got slabbed and authenticated PSA 6. But this is one of the Knicks. This is more representative of how I want my Knicks PC to look. You know, I'm hoping to selling like 80% of it. I could bring back a couple more pieces that are just like more special and higher end, to be quite honest. And, you know, again, we talk about the value of cards. This card, I've had several people reach out about it and just be like, I can't believe you got that deal on the card. And again, it makes you feel really great that I did not like break the bank for this card. If I paid 3 times as much as I did, I don't think I'd have such positive feelings towards it, but it's a bit of an outlier, and it's like my main Nick card, and I absolutely love it.
Perfect. Awesome. Now we step into your top 4 in the PC. Very excited to touch on these cards. A lot of variety, a lot of one set we've already talked about, and then a lot of sets we haven't. So I'd love to, you can just start with whichever card you want and just keep going here.
Yeah, I mean, 2024 has been a great year collecting because I added one of these cards, or 2 of these cards here actually. So, and they're 2 of my top 4 favorites. So the first one on the left is it just came in a month and a half ago. It's a 2004 SP Game Used patch, Bernie Williams logo thread 1 of 1. So that's basically the logo man of baseball. Bernie does not have a ton of playing year logos like this. So, and I think I have to do more research, but I think this is one of the first times they ever had like a logo man essentially for baseball, this set. So this showed up on Heritage in late March on a 30-day auction. So you want to talk about just the grind every day of checking the watchers and the bidding and the level of shadow boxing I did against mystery bidders. Like, what is this mystery bidder doing? Oh, someone put another. All they were doing is probably just putting down a little amount to see if they could enter extended bidding. And Heritage auctions, their extended bidding is quite exhausting, especially when you're East Coast. I think this closed around midnight, but I finally was able to get it a little under what I probably thought I would go for, but I definitely was going to try to shell out as much as I could for this, because it's a really special card of my main player PC. And, you know, when you get a 1-of-1 from 2004, it's a logo man game worn. I mean, what a sweet card. I'm so happy to own it. And the intricacy of the design is, you know, in hand. It's wild. It's a really great card.
Awesome looking card. I love the different variation logo men between sports is just really cool too. Obviously you have a different logo for the sports. That makes sense, but I just love how the history of them are very different, you know, and the desirability is just cool. I just interviewed somebody who will be on this next week's episode yesterday. And he had a couple really cool logo men. It's just, I love hearing the variation among sports. Like, it's just so interesting and a nice, you know, part of the hobby just to learn about.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, I think when you leave the basketball genre, they become, you know, they're not as desired, but they're still really wonderful. And, you know, to get a player PC card from his playing years, you know, which are obviously 20 years ago, super great ad, incredible design. So happy with the purchase. 5 stars.
5-star review, Heritage.
5-star review myself. Yeah. No.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. What's the next card here you want to touch on?
This is a 2000 finest Bernie Williams Superfractor 1-of-1. There's a great story behind this. There's an awesome collector on Instagram, Perimeter Collectibles, who just, you know, he sent me the assist on one of the 24Ks a few months prior. And then it's about a year ago at like 11 at night, I get a DM and it's like, hey, are you into like Bernie's finest? And I was like, huh? And he's like, there's a Superfractor that was just listed on Blowout. And the price was incredibly, you know, I was surprised how low it was listed, to be honest. But I was like, can you please snatch that card up for me? And he was like, I absolutely will. And he grabbed it for me. He mailed it to me. I offered him finder's fee, anything. He wouldn't take it. He was just really happy the card was going to a collector. And I think, you know, as part of the power of Instagram, I think people can read your true conviction a lot of times and how passionate you are about the cards. So he just basically sent it to me as soon as he got it. I gave him, you know, a little bump, but he was like, please, told me it was completely unnecessary. Super solid assist from him there. And great collector, you should follow. And way more knowledgeable than I am about this. He's been doing this a while. So, but it's just an incredible Superfractor. I think there's only 3 Superfractors from the top set from Bernie's playing career. So I own one of them. So that's incredible. And I think one other has been sold. So I know that one other's been pulled. And I'm not sure if one has ever surfaced.
Is this the first year of supers? I think for football it is. I didn't know about baseball. That's the same
I think
story.
for baseball, 05 would be the first year of, 05 is the first year, I think, for finest. 04 Topps has supers for Chrome for baseball.
Okay. Awesome. What's the next card here you want to touch on?
So my second main player PC, which I don't think we've covered, is Warren Moon. I was looking for a late 90s player to collect. I actually I grew up a Cleveland Browns fan, And then when they moved in 96, I tried the Ravens out for like a week or two when I was 13 years old. I was just not feeling it. But my father was a Cleveland Browns fan. He grew up in the South Bronx and no one had ever watched the Browns before him. So I mean, no one watched football before him. So he just started rooting for the Browns because he loved Jim Brown and everything he stood for on the field, off the field. So, and then I kind of, started leaning more and more into liking the Giants as those lean years without the Browns went along. To this day, I root for both. Anyway, the long story of that, is that I wanted to start collecting more late 90s of a player who was more identifiable, maybe a Hall of Famer. And I started to dive into Warren Moon. I've always loved Warren Moon. Jerseys he wore were awesome. And then doing the research on Card Ladder and whatnot, I realized that, this was an affordable PC for me to pursue. And I didn't really see anyone else on Instagram who was, chasing down Warren Moon cards. So I began to collect him and add some really great cards. Some of his cards were just sitting on eBay, like, his rubies, his PMG, his, all these cards were just sitting on eBay, like there, so I started grabbing them up. And then the story behind this card is a good hobby friend, Volin NC, somehow tracked down, I think a guy who was building this set at some point and was looking to move all of them. And he hit me up and he's like, dude, you're not going to believe what I found. And I was like, what'd you find? And he sent me a picture of this and I was like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. And then Brooklyn Barry Bright reached out to me a couple weeks later. He's like, dude, you're not going to believe what I found. And I was like, is it the Moon 1 of 1? I'm like, it's like, it's a little too much money. I don't really want it, And, they I think they both were kind of like, what the heck? Why would he not go get this card? And finally I was like, maybe I should go get it. I wasn't quite clicking how rare 1 of 1s are, in that genre. And also it's like every 1 of 1 for Moon is a jersey match, right? Mm-hmm. So I ended up messaging the guy, spoke with him on the phone, and finally we reached a deal to get the card. And every single day I'm so grateful those guys convinced me to go get the card because it is my favorite Moon card. Obviously status is it's 1999 Donruss Elite status 1 of 1, card number 1 of the greatest number 1 to ever play football. And it's a card. I mean, it obviously it's significant. I think it's the beginning of Elite and status, and I think it's the first year of that. So to have the 1 of 1 from that set, it's the only 1 of 1 from the set of my favorite player. I mean, again, it's just an awesome card that I own.
Is this something I can't remember? I think Vic 7 Collector maybe talked about this set, or maybe at least posted on Instagram. Is the status or something where it's like numbered to your jersey, or is there something?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. So it's numbered to your jersey, and then I'm not sure quite how they bake that in with the card number, but obviously this is the number 1 card in the set list, and then his aspirations is a number to 99 or something like that. So, and again, I think this is the year where that all started. It really is like Donruss's twist on Essential Credentials, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so. And this is really one of his last playing career years because he was in 2000 sets in a Chiefs jersey. He was the backup quarterback of the team. So just an amazing card that I'm just so thrilled to own and so glad that I have hobby friends that kind of smacked me into like waking up and going and making the move.
Yeah. And speaking of that, of course, I shared episode 31, the Peyton Manning PMG that I added, and I did not give you enough credit in that episode. I don't think I said names. I don't want anyone to be offended, but that was fully Danny because it was very, well, everyone else too, but it was a very similar experience. It popped up, and I think it was you or somebody messaged it in the chat. I didn't see it. Somebody texted me, and then I went and looked, and you guys were like, I'm not a Peyton collector, but this seems like a really good deal. And then nothing really connected with me. I was just like, oh, I mean, yeah, it's cool, but it's pretty expensive. I mean, I don't know. Right. And then I didn't think much of it. And then you guys just kept going and going. I'm like, okay, I have the funds because I just sold some other stuff. I'm just going to buy it. And I'm so glad I did because when you get it in hand and you start to really understand the set, like you just said, again, having not really been in the 90s too much for myself and probably, still really not at this point a ton, it clicks with me how cool this is. It's only, again, playing days, PMG in a Colts uniform is nothing. Everything else is obviously in the Tennessee jersey and stuff like that. So credit to you because it's a very similar story. And it's like, I don't know about you with this one, but I then post that and everyone's like, how much do you want for this? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, nope. And I'm like, okay, I guess everyone understands how cool this was, but I'm the one dummy that didn't at the time right away.
No, hobby friends are just incredible to have, and especially ones that are super knowledgeable. And when that one popped up, it was like at a price where, whether you loved it or not, you'd be able to move off on it if you didn't like it, and maybe even make a little money in the transaction. So, but yeah, sometimes you just need some people to talk a little sense into you, especially when they know how much you spend on other things. It's like all the times I've spent money on other things. It's like, this is a 1 of 1 of your player that you need to go get this card while you can. And so, I'm very glad I got it.
Awesome. Now, what's the final card here?
It's a 1998 Metal Universe Precious Metal Gems of Mariano Rivera. It's a card I feel like I have no business owning. It popped up on eBay from a seller who I guess you could just tell kind of right away he wasn't too used to like the format of eBay and whatnot. He like accidentally listed like at a buy it now and then an auction, and he kept like kind of finagling with things. And I messaged him a couple times. And I offered him a little under the last comp because it wasn't graded, and you could kind of see some of the damage on the surface, which is something you notice with Metal Universe, like because the cards they kind of stuck together in the packs. So lo and behold, he like shockingly accepted my offer, and I was just so happy that he did because it's a card that I from a cost standpoint, again, it's something I knew I could move off of. It was the most expensive card I've ever bought, but additionally. This is the guy right here. This is a guy that I just would not ever PC because his cards can be very expensive. But, for non-baseball fans out there, this was about like when you heard Enter Sandman in the bottom of the ninth inning and Mariano was trotting out there, it meant the game was over. There was nothing as sure as him coming out there and getting the final 3 outs of the game. He would do it with the one pitch, the cutter. He was on the mound for some of my absolute favorite Yankee moments. Not much else I could say about the guy other than, I tie him a lot with my childhood joys of watching sports. And, I may never get a Jeter PMG, but darn it, I have a Mariano Rivera PMG, which it's just an incredible card. And, from the standpoint of the card, I find it to be one of the more aesthetically pleasing cards in the 98 Metal Universe across sports. It's got, it doesn't have a famous background, but he's dead center with like 2 overpasses running, behind him above his head. So I think visually it's a really beautiful card as well. So, and obviously I love Precious Metal Gems. So, it checks a lot of the boxes for me, and I'm thrilled I was able to get it because, I don't know what other opportunities I would have had to at this point. And recently there was an auction that sold for 5 figures. So, very happy to get it when I did.
It's amazing. And one thing with this set, and you mentioned a lot about the backgrounds on these cards. I was just thinking out loud how funny it would be if they did these for, like, let's say there's a sports team in just some random city that was just junky. I mean, there's nothing there. What would your backgrounds be like? You know what I'm saying? Like New York, you have all these iconic things, but like some cities, I'm just thinking, no offense, but like I can't think of what the sites are. You'd put on 10 different cards.
So for my birthday last year, I bought a hobby box of 98 Metal Universe Baseball. And I was totally, before I bought it, I said, you're not going to make $1 off this thing, but I've always just loved the base set. So I was like, if I could just put together like 75% of the base set, like I'm fine with that. You know what I mean? So I bought it. I won it at an auction, and I bought it and I ripped it, and you could see some of the backgrounds. And if you're looking for an absurd background in 1998 Metal Universe Baseball, Travis Fryman, which I want to say is card 8 or 9, is sliding into a base, but the background is a diving board. It is blessed Arena Designs. They made such magical cards, but it is one of the more silly looking cards from across the sports. It's worth checking out. But yeah, he's sliding off of like what looks like he's sliding off like a diving board. So, and he played for the Detroit Tigers, which I love Detroit. I have a great time there. But I guess that was the background they went with.
Yeah, that's how I was going to say Detroit with this too. But I also like Detroit. I lived there for a little while, and I like the city. And I know there are sites to see. But
yeah,
in the 90s,
Motown,
yeah,
like we have things. There was things, but nothing with the diving board. It's a very interesting. It's one of the funnier cards from either of the sets. So
it's awesome. All right, Danny. So we'll wrap up here with a fast 5 that works with you. 5 quick, hopefully fun questions that kind of maybe touch on some of the stuff we talked about already. Would love to know, number 1, what's your favorite box to open that you maybe recall from being a kid, or, you just mentioned that 98 that you opened. Is there any that come to mind that are the most nostalgic for you?
I don't do a ton of ripping, to be honest with you. That ripping that Metal Universe was so enjoyable though. And it's funny you say that because recently I added like hobby box to like my eBay searches and it's just all these awesome sets from like late 90s or early 2000s come up. I would love to purchase a box of Fleer Ultra from like baseball from 98, 99, 2000 in that range, just because it's actually the one set that seems like quasi affordable in terms of like the fact that you're going to get no return on your investment. Usually they're in like the $100 range. So I will get that soon and rip it. It's going to happen sometime soon.
Save it for the National. We can all be there. Maybe.
Yeah, there we go. I won't be there, but I'll be there in spirit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in the future, if you're ever
yeah, there you go. Right.
I'm not going either. I just forgot as I said that.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite sports game that you've ever attended? Again, being like it sounds like a partial season ticket holder for many different teams here in New York. What's your favorite game you've ever attended live?
Jeez, also that's a great question. So it's very specific. In 1995, the Yankees made the playoffs against the Mariners, and Game Two was an extra innings game that they won. And coincidentally, my father passed away later in 1996, so this was the last baseball game I ever went to with my dad.
Oh,
And Don Mattingly hit a postseason home run, which is amazing because he keeps showing up in Instagram feeds constantly now. Gary Thorne makes the call and he hits a home run into the right field bleachers, which is right around where we were sitting. And I just remember fans just throwing beers in the air and being drenched. I'm like 11, 12 years old, drenched in beer, looking at my dad like, this is the best time I've ever had in my life. So that, and then the Yankees ended up winning extra innings. Jim Leyritz hit a walk-off home run. The Yankees would go back to Seattle and lose the series, unfortunately. But it was the most memorable game I ever been to. And at that point, it was like, I am a Yankee fan for the rest of my life. It'll never, ever change. And coincidentally, I found the ticket stub to that game recently, and I plan on sending it off to PSA to get it graded in the very near future, because it is just the best game I've ever been to.
That's amazing. Yeah, screw the Mets, screw the Jets at that point. Who needs them?
Yeah, we don't like teams that rhyme.
No, yeah. Next question, and maybe this is an easy answer. I only just said that if you could own any sports team, whether that's actually full ownership, you're the tyrant that owns the team. What team would you take over?
I feel, oh boy, that's a good question there. I'm getting at my wit's end with Yankees ownership, so I'd take over the Yankees. That's who I would take over. You're the most valuable club in the world, and there's this like hesitancy to spend extra money to win, to put winning fields on there, winning players on the field. So I'm going with the Yankees. That'll obviously make me a very wealthy person as well. And then I would put that money back. I'll be a different kind of owner. Put that money back into the team, make the fans happy.
Perfect.
Free concessions for everyone.
Yeah, sell some of your PC to get a new player.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, the Mariano Rivera PMG is going to have to go, but I'll buy the Yankees instead. That's fine.
Yeah, maybe not pay a contract, but at least buy them a nice steak dinner. And
yeah, seriously. I mean, I'm a fair guy.
Yeah,
I'm a different type of billionaire.
Fourth question here. If you had to collect a modern Knicks player, let's pretend the market was based strictly on this. This is unrealistic. Let's say the market works where it's based on their current performance and how you think they're going to impact the team over the years to come. Which player would you choose to, we're calling it invest in? What player would you invest in as a fan of the Knicks?
If I could do it irrationally, it'd be Jalen Brunson. I've been watching his cards a lot, and he has become so wildly popular. His cards aren't like incredibly overpriced, but for what it's worth, I'm kind of like, I don't really want to dive into those cards at the moment, but the amount of joy that Jalen Brunson has brought the city and all the Knicks fans watching him play over the last couple of years, he's just remarkable. He's undersized, he's tough as nails, he plays all the time, he plays hurt, he shows up in big games. He has like checked all the boxes for New York sports fans, and it's just a reminder that the city, people love Yankees, they love the Mets, Giants. This city loves the Knicks so much. It's like even my wife was watching the games, and she grew up in Manhattan in the '90s, so she has some connection to the Knicks. But she was sitting there like, "Are we winning?" My wife could not care less about sports. So the amount of joy that guy brings the city, I would love to collect some of his cards. But again, being pragmatic about it, I'm like, the cards now, maybe in 5 years, they're much cheaper.
Yeah.
So.
There you go. Fifth and final question. Let's get some Danny words of wisdom here. What's a piece of advice you give to anyone listening, whether they're, beginner, collector, or long time? What's a piece of advice, assuming your knowledge is valid and everybody cares to hear?
Yeah. I mean, I would never tell the long-time investors exactly long-time investors, long-time collectors what to do. But, I think for anyone who's starting out there, it's just take your time, take your time and find like a hive, like find your friends, really, for me, the hobby became much more comprehensible when I found some friends to ask questions to and to talk to you about, the importance of, staying on budget, not endlessly buying every cool card you think, especially when you're newer in the hobby. I think the first couple of years, there was this urge to kind of like, you didn't know what was rare and not rare, or would pop up again and not pop up again. And also there's like, I felt this weird urge to like catch up. You know what I mean? It's like I didn't collect for 30 years, like now I have to try to like make up for lost, and that was a very ineffective way to collect, and I've moved on from a lot of that stuff. But I think it just knowing that if you really do love collecting cards, that you'll be doing that for a long time, and it's important to just remember that you have time on your side. That things will go up in price, down in price, but just find what it is you love. If you're going to overspend on a purchase, make sure it's something you plan on owning long term, and just have fun. You know what I mean? Have fun and find cards that connect with you. You know what I mean? A lot of those team sets, you know, we went through, those are the teams that I remember from my childhood, from simpler times, you know, before, you know, I had kids and overhead and, you know, the stresses of real life, you know, to flip through those binder pages, it's like I kind of, you know, lose track of, you know, that it's 2024, and for a few seconds it's 1998 and Chumbawamba's playing, you know. So you know, just find a connection with things that, you know, give you a great distraction from, you know, the rest of your life, and you know, it's a wonderful hobby if you treat it the right way.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Danny. This was a ton of fun. Go follow Danny on Instagram if you haven't already. Feel free to message him, bug him, tell him what you loved and thought he was completely off the wall on with this episode. He loves to hear criticism.
Yeah, and when I own the Yankees soon, you know, I'm inviting everyone to Yankee Stadium. It's a collector's night. You just come and fill your PSA slabs. And
thanks so much, Danny.
Thanks, brother. Have a good one. All right.
Appreciate it.